Robert Kuok is Malaysia's richest man and one of the most influential within the ASEAN region. But it wasn't smooth sailing to the top. A troubled family, World War II, corruption, greed, and everything in between, his story has it all. So let's go from the start. Robert Kuok was born in 1923 in Johor Bahru to a Malay Chinese family and was the youngest of three brothers. Robert's father, Kuok Keng Kang, had arrived in Malaya from Fuzhou at the beginning of the 20th century. His parents' relationship was complicated. His father was a womanizer, a gambler, and an opium addict. And even though the marriage stayed intact for many years, the household went from crisis to crisis. Little Robert adapted by growing up much faster than other children his age. Robert's father was a natural-born trader. He had social skills and made friends with Malay civil servants in the government, making a variety of deals that would help his family survive. His big break came in the 1920s, serving as a contractor under the English colonial system. So Robert's father had always admired the British colonial administration. He felt that they brought law and order and created basic infrastructure. But Robert had always felt that they were racist, arrogant, and patronising. Then the Great Depression hit. Money was tight, and Robert's mother had to figure out how to make money and food last. And to add fuel to the fire, Robert's father eventually fell in love with a young woman who became his second wife. Although not unusual at the time in colonial Malaya, it did provide further hardship for Robert, because whatever money his father made now flowed to the new wife and her new family. These early years of financial misery and deprivation would be a driving force for Kuok later in life. But Robert was no star student at school. Through his father's help, he managed to get into Raffles College in Singapore, where he got to know many of the future leaders in Malaysia and Singapore, including Abdul Razak and Lee Kuan Yew. Important contacts that would prove to be valuable later in life. His stay at Raffles College was cut short though by the war. In 1941, bombs exploded across Singapore when Japanese forces attacked. Robert knew that the British wouldn't stand a chance and that the Japanese were brutal in how they treated their victims. The Chinese were treated worst of all. The Kuoks felt that they had to leave Singapore. Through family friends, they managed to escape to a pineapple farm in Johor. Whenever soldiers came by, they pretended to be peasant workers to avoid attracting attention. Even during these dark and depressing times, looking back, Robert felt that this was one of the happiest memories of his life because he felt that he was on an adventure and he was united together with his family. Later on though, the family was compelled to cooperate with the Japanese because you either took a job as a clerk or you stayed at home and were suspected of being anti-Japanese. So Robert's father sent him to work as an assistant at Mitsubishi Trading in Johor Bahru. It was an invaluable experience for Robert as he became the first employee of Mitsubishi Trading in Johor at age 19, and after a few years he would have several employees under him. Mitsubishi's branch in Singapore was highly profitable because the Japanese military administration had given Mitsubishi a monopoly on importing and supplying rice and cigarettes to Malaya, and Robert was right in the middle of that trade. And little Robert was fond of the side hustle. Through his social skills, he made friends all around Singapore and would team up with purchasers of rice and give them extra large allocations, then share the profits together with them. It was a form of corruption, of black marketeering. He didn't care, and he was so young that the risk of getting caught didn't even cross his mind. He amassed millions of so-called banana money, the currency used during occupation. Unfortunately, the value of the currency declined by the end of the war as money printing was used to finance the war effort, and Robert lost most of the money he had made through these highly profitable side businesses. After the war, Mitsubishi's business in Singapore dwindled, and Robert lost his lucrative position as a trading assistant. In Singapore, the Japanese banana money became worthless and everyone had to start from scratch. He did make one last deal. His Japanese boss offered him 200 to 300 bales of cigarette paper from Japan that he could pay for with useless banana currency. He made $400,000 on that single transaction and accumulated capital in an environment where capital was increasingly scarce. But when Robert's father passed away in 1948, the three Kuok brothers decided to continue his father's business under a new company name, Kuok Brothers Limited. And even though Robert was young, he became an acting CEO. In his own words, "I knew that I had what was needed to be a businessman. Like a duck taking to water, I am a very focused person. When I do something, I want to do it well." Problem numero uno was how to fund their business. The British banks practiced blatant discrimination and refused to lend to local firms. Kuok was furious at the racism underlying colonial Singapore and vowed to survive without the help of HSBC or the other Western banks operating them. Enter Chin Sophan Panik of Bangkok Bank. Chin was a Tier 2 Chinese and embraced them with open arms. Within an hour of stepping into their office in Singapore, he offered the Kuok brothers letters of credit and bankers' acceptances worth tens of millions of dollars. In the 1950s, as Britain slowly lost control over their colonies, new opportunities emerged for local firms. During the colonial era, British manufactured goods enjoyed preferential tariffs, but when the British Empire was dismantled, many of these proud British manufacturers went belly up and a host of local companies fought to fill the void. The Kuok brothers set up an office at Cecil Street in Singapore, continuing to focus on government contracts for key commodities such as rice, sugar, and wheat flour. In the beginning, they were simply distributors. They bought wheat from Sim Darby and distributed it to the Johor market, for which they managed to get an exclusivity contract. But the big break came in 1952. The federal Malayan government called for a tender for the Government Rice Agency. The job was to receive rice from overseas, store it in warehouses owned by the government, and transport it to the southern half of the Malay Peninsula. People thought Robert was crazy for even trying. No local company had ever put in a bid, but he argued that their track record was just as good as anybody else's, and they finally won the contract to become rice agents for the Malayan government in Singapore. It wasn't lucrative, but they were dealing in high volumes. Robert became an expert on rice. He travelled frequently to Bangkok and developed personal ties to exporters, learning everything from scratch. Robert worked hard. Whilst most other businessmen in the region attended hostess bars and gambled, instead Robert worked a minimum of 12 hours a day, every day. Eventually he became frustrated with the rice trade. Rice didn't experience wild price swings, so margins remained low. And the barriers to entry were non-existent, causing intense competition. And this is where the sugar story starts. Robert felt sugar could become a much more profitable commodity for them to trade. It's a highly sought after commodity, so when there's no supply, the commodity can rise to almost any price. That's exactly what he was looking for, capped downside and potentially unlimited upside. Robert can't live the button-down life like you and I. He wanted it all, the terrifying lows, the dizzying highs, the creamy middle. It was a difficult industry to break into. All imports into Malaya were controlled by the European Hongs. Just like with rice, Kuok started buying sugar from the British and distributing it. It was during this time that he got in touch with a mainland Chinese man called Lim Kai. Lim worked for the PRC state-owned enterprise, COFCO. Mainland Chinese traders were not allowed to visit Malaysia or Singapore, so that gave Robert a unique position as a middleman exporting from Southeast Asia to communist China. Taking a nice cut in the process, obviously. Robert eventually formed a relationship with communist China's version of the CIA, the Ministry of Public Security, acting as a middleman in political matters between Malaysia and the PRC. He also found out that he could compete with Guthrie and other British Hongs by importing sugar directly from India, which enjoyed preferential import duties thanks to its connection to the British Commonwealth. Another break came from his Japanese trading partner, Mitsui. The Japanese asked if Kuok wanted to become a partner in a sugar refinery project. It's unclear exactly why the Japanese felt they needed Kuok, but he proved to be invaluable in securing concessions from the government. Robert wanted the sugar refinery to enjoy full tariff protection and ban all imports on refined sugar. This was a tall order, but Robert benefited from a change in the political landscape. Malaysia became an independent nation in 1957, and he had become friends with the new Minister of Commerce, Ker Johari. It was through this contact that Robert basically secured a monopoly on refined sugar in the new nation of Malaysia. Even though the Kuok brothers were only a minority partner in the project, Robert managed to gain bargaining power against his Japanese friends. Ker Johari managed to make it such that the government had to approve every single foreign partner for the refinery project. That provided bargaining power for the Kuoks in securing a better deal in the project. And not only that, but Kuok also controlled the supply of raw materials and distribution of refined sugar, enabling him to make money all across the supply chain. It proved to be yet another of his side deals that served him well throughout his career. It wasn't just tariff protection that enabled Kuok to become rich. He was also a skilled operator. Pushing his employees hard, his sugar refineries worked 330 days a year compared to the 270 days for competitors in Europe and America. By 1961, 80% of Malaysia's 250,000 tonnes of refined sugar sold per year passed through Kuok's hands. As Homer said, first you get the sugar, then you get the power, then you get the women. Sorry, I had to. But after getting into the sugar game, Kuok was rich. He started taking active positions in the sugar market, speculating via sugar futures. It was a risky game with leverage. He could make massive gains, but he could also go bust in an instant. During 1963 alone, he almost quadrupled his entire capital from 5 million Malaysian Singapore dollars to 19 million. Robert recounts one story of the summer of 1963 when he went long 20,000 tonnes of physical sugar. The price collapsed from almost £40 per tonne to £33. Robert feared that he would be wiped out completely. Another 10 to 12 days passed. The price continued to sink to a new low of £30. But in September 1963, Hurricane Flora hit the Caribbean and the sugar prices soared from £30 to £60 per tonne. From zero to hero, Kuok ended up making the most money he had ever made in the shortest period of his life. But the story could have turned out very differently, and he still wonders what would have happened if the market had have turned against him in that summer of 63. By 1964, he was juggling 3 businesses: sugar refining, imports into Malaysia, and futures trading. But he wanted more. One thing he learned from the Japanese is that you should focus on products for which there are large, established markets and for which demand is uniform and sustainable. So he went into the flour industry. He started to import flour directly from Australia, bypassing distributors such as Simdarby and Guthrie. Kuok called up his good mate Kerr Johari once again to award him a flour mill license. And yet again, he managed to secure a monopoly. Kerr Johari made it sure that imports of flour would be banned. Knowing that the import business was suddenly in danger, the British Hongs were in big trouble. Simdarby didn't have any local flour mills and didn't have any licenses either, so their entire flour business vanished in an instant. Simdarby sold them the Blue Key brand name for a bargain basement price of $25,000. But they had no other choice. The Malaysian government had basically given Kuok yet another monopoly. After dictator Suharto came to power in 1966, Kuok moved his focus to Indonesia. A friendship with another overseas Chinese trader called Sudono Salim gave him access to Suharto. He suggested to Salim to start flour mills in Indonesia and for them to become partners. Salim relayed this information to Suharto, who thought it was a good idea. Since the project was restricted to Indonesian nationals only, Kuok had to use Salim as a custodian for his shares. In other words, during the decades working together, Kuok didn't have a single proof that he owned shares in any of his Indonesian flour mills. That just shows the amount of trust that existed among the overseas Chinese traders throughout Southeast Asia. Salim honoured his words and paid out the dividends regularly. After a few decades, Kuok started to feel shortchanged by Salim's son Anthony, who later controlled the family's Salim group. He diluted Kuok's shareholding in a series of transactions, so Kuok got out in the 1990s, ending his relationship with the Salim group. Kuok also did other deals in Indonesia, including with Yani Haryanto, who lived just across the road from Suharto in Jakarta. Haryanto managed to secure a contract from Suharto to buy rice and sugar for Indonesia, and the Kuok brothers were responsible to sell the rice and sugar to him from overseas. The volumes were incredible. Roughly 500,000 tonnes of sugar passed through Robert's hands every single year. In the late 60s, after Robert's experience with commodity trading in London, he was keen to diversify. He wanted stability and looked to the property market to provide it. In 1968, Kuok was offered a 10% shareholding in the land where Shangri-La, Singapore sits today. A prime piece of land, just a bee's dick away from the main shopping hub of Orchard Road. Kuok wanted to build single-family villas, but a friend quickly advised against that. So they built the Shangri-La Hotel, the same hotel where Donald Trump stayed at during his meeting with Kim Jong-un in 2018. Kuok first teamed up with the Seattle-based Western International to run the hotel. They took a $200,000 front-end fee for their expertise during construction, and then 5% of gross operating profit after the hotel had opened for business. But Western made a huge mistake in their contract, saying that the contract would only stretch for 10 years. Robert jumped at the opportunity to break that contract, and in 1978, Kuok booted them out and set up his own hotel management company instead, Shangri-La Hotels. Today, the Shangri-La Group operates 100 hotels and owns 80 across the world. But there was trouble in paradise. In the 70s, Kuok started to stray in his marriage. He fell in love with a woman called Pauline and took her with him to Hong Kong in 1979. He felt Hong Kong's taxes were more favourable, and he also felt it was closer to the action, with communist China developing rapidly. And just like his father, who he despised, he decided to have a second family. He bought a townhouse in an area called Strawberry Hill at Victoria's Peak and seemed to enjoy family time, for perhaps the first time in his life. While in Hong Kong, Kuok noticed that office rents kept rising. He felt that he might as well hedge himself by owning the building himself. That was the start of Kuok's property business, and long story short, thanks to the underlying growth in the economy and the region, Kuok's property portfolio in China is now worth billions. Today, 94-year-old Robert Kuok is Malaysia's richest man with an estimated fortune over $12 billion. And whilst the pandemic has hurt some of his hospitality-related businesses, he still remains one of the most powerful businessmen in Asia. Robert Kuok's story is an interesting one. And depending how you look at it, it paints a totally different picture. If you read his biography with no prior knowledge of him, you might think he's tough, gritty, entrepreneurial, and did what he had to survive. If you read Asian Godfathers, you might come away with the view of a corrupt, profiteering power broker. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, but I'll let you form your opinion for yourself. If you enjoyed this deep dive on the Sugar King, be sure to check out Asian Century Stocks for the OG text write-up. For what it's worth, I'm a happy paying subscriber and can't recommend Michael enough. If you want to support me, it's the usual, like, comment, subscribe, yada yada yada, Bob's your uncle. Until next time, have a good one.